Today, we're diving into the pretty wild history of the NFL's Miami Dolphins. It's a story of, these incredible highs and then a decades-long tough search to try and get back there. So, this right here, this is Hard Rock Stadium where the Dolphins play today. But honestly, to really get this team, we've got to go way back. We're talking nearly 60 years of history, packed with some of the biggest names and most unforgettable moments, not just for the Dolphins, but in the history of the entire sport. All right, so here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at how they got started as Florida's first franchise. Then we'll get into that perfect dynasty. After that, the Dan Marino era. Then we'll talk about their more recent search for glory. And we'll wrap up with their rivals, logos, and the whole legacy of the team. All right, Section 1, Florida's first franchise. Let's start at the very beginning, right? Back when the Dolphins were a brand new expansion team in the old American Football League.
It's funny to think about now, but before the Dolphins came along, pro football in Florida just didn't really stick. So when the Dolphins were founded in 1965 and started playing in '66, it was a huge deal. They became the oldest pro sports team in the state, and really, the first time pro football had a permanent home there.
But man, those first few seasons were rough. I mean, really rough. We're talking a 15-39-2 record over their first 4 years. But, and this is a big but, everything was about change. A single hire was about to turn this entire franchise on its head. Okay, Section 2, a perfect dynasty. This is the era that didn't just define the Dolphins, it set a record that, well, it might just be unbreakable. For real. So in 1970, this guy, Don Shula, comes over from the Baltimore Colts. And boom, the change was instant. And get this. In his 26 seasons as head coach, the Dolphins only had a losing record twice. Twice. The man was just an absolute force of nature. And under Shula, it wasn't just about winning. Oh no, they completely dominated. We're talking about becoming the first team to go to 3 straight Super Bowls. 3. They weren't just a good team, they were the undisputed kings of the AFC. And then there's this number, 17-0. That's it. That's the whole story right there. That was their record in 1972. 14 wins in the regular season, then 3 more in the playoffs. Undefeated, just absolute perfection. And this right here, this was the pinnacle. This was them beating Washington in Super Bowl VII to cap it all off. And think about this. To this day, the 1972 Miami Dolphins are still the only team in the Super Bowl era to pull off a perfect season. Start to finish, no losses. It's legendary.
Now, what's really important to remember is that this wasn't just some flash in the pan. This was sustained, historic dominance. They won back-to-back Super Bowls, 7 and 8. And how did they do it? With a punishing run game and this incredible defense, famously called the no-name defense. Why? Because they didn't need flashy superstars. They were just a disciplined, brutal unit that completely suffocated offenses.
Okay, so now we're moving on. The dynasty era eventually starts to fade, as all great eras do. But right as it does, a new kind of legend arrives in Miami. And this guy, well, he was about to completely redefine what it meant to be an NFL quarterback. Enter Dan Marino. From 1983 all the way to 1999, he was just electric. He became one of the most prolific passers the league had ever, and I mean ever, seen. His release was lightning quick. His arm was an absolute cannon, and he just went out and completely rewrote the NFL record books. I mean, Marino's individual brilliance was just undeniable. He led this super high-powered offense that was always a threat to score from anywhere on the field. Look at these numbers. He took the Dolphins to the playoffs 10 times and won 5 division titles. The guy was a machine. But, and this is the big but of his entire career, despite all of that insane personal success, all the records he shattered, Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl. It's the central tension of his legacy, right? The team just could never seem to build a championship defense around him. So he's often called one of the greatest players to never, ever win a ring. All right, so that brings us to the post-Marino years. And this section is all about the search for glory, a really long and, let's be honest, often frustrating search for a new identity. Okay, this chart tells you everything you need to know about the modern era. Just look at the difference. Since Marino retired, the Dolphins have really struggled to find any kind of consistent success. In fact, they currently have the longest active playoff win drought in the entire NFL. Think about that. Yeah, this whole era has been defined by two things, really. A revolving door of coaches and a seemingly endless search for the next franchise quarterback. It's been over 2 decades. Now, there have been some fun moments, some flashes of hope. Remember the Wildcat offense? That was wild. But that sustained greatness from the early eras, it's been completely elusive. Okay, last section. Let's talk about the identity of the Dolphins. The rivals, the logos, the whole legacy and culture that surrounds this team. So being in the AFC East means you're going to have some epic rivalries, and the Dolphins are no exception. The games against the Bills and Patriots are always intense, for sure. But the rivalry, the one that's always been the most bitter, the most heated, that's got to be with the New York Jets. The team's look has also changed a lot over the years. For the longest time, they had that iconic, classic logo, you know the one, the dolphin wearing the helmet, jumping through the sunburst. But in 2013, they went for a total redesign, introducing this more modern, streamlined swimming dolphin. But you know what hasn't changed? The colors. Through all the different logos, all the different uniform designs, that distinctive aqua and orange has always been there. It's a color combo you see from a mile away, and you instantly know that's the Miami Dolphins. And, of course, their home has evolved too. All those dynasty years, the perfect season, that all happened in the legendary, loud, and iconic Miami Orange Bowl. Then, in 1987, they made the move to their current state-of-the-art home, which we all know today as Hard Rock Stadium. So when you boil it all down, the story of the Miami Dolphins is really a story about living in the shadow of its own perfect past. That legacy, that 17-0 season, it set an impossibly high bar. Which leaves us with a really fascinating question for their future. After all these decades of trying, can they finally build their next great era?